So I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that we're headed full speed off a cliff if we don't move quickly to address two major issues that we're facing today: a looming water shortage and climate change. The good news is that there are sustainable solutions like biochar that can be used to address both of these. But we have to act quickly. And to do that is going to require change. So just a second about change, because I think what's required to get people to change is that there has to be an economic incentive to change, and there has to be minimal behavioral shifts required. So we all know that we should be doing more to address climate change today. But we haven't all stopped driving to work. We didn't start walking or riding a bike. It's kind of hard to do if you live 15 miles away from where you work. But if instead there was a car that didn't pollute, you might try that, minimal behavioral change. You don't have to stop driving. But if that car costs 3 times what you're driving today, you're probably not going to make that shift. But once that car becomes less expensive and it gets 500 miles to the charge, you might think about it, because now you have an economic incentive to change and there's minimal behavioral risks in doing so. And that's what we have to get to with these tools like biochar in order to get them adopted quickly. So let's talk about the water crisis. The water crisis is really two things. The first part about the water crisis is water scarcity. Second part is water security. Water scarcity is very simple. We're running out of fresh water. While 70% of the globe is covered in water, less than 1% of that is drinkable. And with population increase, we're just simply running out of fresh water. Today, 21 of the top 37 aquifers are running dry. 1.1 billion people face water shortages today. McKinsey & Company estimates that by 2030, demand is going to exceed supply of water by 40%. By 2050, that number skyrockets to 120%. Imagine that, a world without water. You guys have used water today. How many of you have had a glass of water today? A cup of coffee? Washed your dishes? Took a shower? Right, most of you. Imagine that wasn't possible. And that's why I think the next wars are not going to be about oil. They're going to be about water. In order to solve this, we're going to have to start to reuse more of the water that we pump out of the ground today, use once and then discharge. And we're going to have to start to desalinate more water. Both of these are going to require sustainable filtration media. The second part of the water crisis is water security. This is about how safe is your water to drink. We think everything is great. You turn on the tap here in the United States 24 hours a day and water flows. Did you know in India there's not one single water municipality that pumps water 24 hours a day? Our problem here in the United States is that our infrastructure is old and crumbling. 250,000 water main breaks every year. 16% of the water that leaves the pumping station does not get to the end consumer. And where water leaks out, pathogens get in. But this isn't the only thing we need to worry about. How many of you have heard about the lead issues in Flint? How about the lead issues in Newark, Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C.? There are 1,300 municipalities in the United States with known lead issues today. 25% of Americans drink from a water source that doesn't meet some safety regulation. And while the municipalities would love to fix this problem, they can't really do it, as it'll take $1 trillion and over 10 years to do so. But those pathogens aren't the only things we need to worry about. In addition, we're starting to see forever chemicals, PFOAs, PFAS, start to creep into our water supply. In addition, pharmaceuticals, everything from birth control pills to mood stabilizers, are showing up in our water supply. Many of these are not regulated by the EPA, which means they're not being tested for. To solve this problem, we're going to have to take more responsibility ourselves to make sure that our water is safe to drink. This means we're going to have to do more whole home filtration systems, more pitcher-based systems, in order to ensure that our water is safe to drink. So what is biochar? Biochar is when you take an agricultural or waste or forestry waste product and convert it into a stable carbon. A lot of you have heard of this, activated carbon. Many of you use it every day. If you've got a HEPA filter in your vacuum cleaner, that's activated carbon. If you use one of those pitcher systems, that's activated carbon. Today, most of the activated carbon is made from coal. It's dug out of the ground and then activated. And it's great for removing organic pathogens, but does nothing for removing dissolved metals. In that pitcher system, about 60% of what's in there is an ion exchange resin bead. This is a petroleum-based microplastic product, not very environmentally friendly. And the rest of that is activated carbon. They put the ion exchange resin beads in there to be able to take out dissolved metals. So how does this affect climate change? Well, today, that agricultural and forestry waste products are typically either burned in the fields, which produces carbon dioxide, or they're left to rot, which produces methane, two very powerful greenhouse gases. But if instead of burning these or letting them rot, we turn them into, through pyrolysis, into an activated carbon, now that carbon is in a stable form and won't release into the atmosphere. We pull that carbon out of the normal carbon cycle and we sequester it for hundreds of years. In fact, the UN IPCC report, the latest one that just came out a few weeks ago, identified the production and use of biochar as one of the major tools that we have today in addressing climate change. They estimate that it can remove 2 gigatons of greenhouse gases every year and sequester it. By comparison, a car will use or produce about 4.6 tons of greenhouse gases. So a significant dent in what we're doing today. And this is where Glanris comes in. We take rice hulls, the world's largest ag waste product. 220 billion pounds of this stuff are generated every year. And they're either burned in the fields or they're left to rot, producing quite literally millions of tons of greenhouse gases every year. But instead, we convert it through our proprietary process into a biochar we call biocarbon. We call it biocarbon because not only does it remove organic pathogens, the way activated carbon does alone, but we also remove metals. Remember those ion exchange resin beads and that? Yes. So we can now remove metals. So we can take that pitcher-based system you have, take those microplastic products out of that, simply substitute our product, and now you'll have a sustainable method for filtering your water. And here's the best part. It's less expensive. So now you have economic incentive to make that shift, and there's very little behavioral changes required because it's a drop-in replacement for what you're already using. And this is how we're going to be able to address our looming water crisis through sustainable technologies like this, and how we're going to be able to, at the same time, reduce our greenhouse gas production and sequester that carbon for hundreds of years. Your lifetime, your kids' lifetime, their kids' lifetime. This is how we're going to be able to address those problems, and this is how we're going to be able to stop ourselves from driving off that cliff. Thank you.